Our first drawing subject is this lovely apricot rose. Now, these subjects are chosen with the thought of being a 5 to 10 minute daily exercise drawing improvement subject. And the idea is to do a relatively quick gestural drawing of them, to settle it somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, something that can be done with just a small part of time in a busy daily routine, but over a week, over weeks, over a month, result in a great deal of improvement. So I start with this bottom petal, and I decide that I'm going to put some hatching on it to represent some of the values, which I'm a bit hesitant to simply because it's going to be black and white, and it's such a lovely, vibrant, intense apricot colour in the darker value areas in the photo. But I decided we'll give it a stronger sense of 3 dimensions, and that's something I can bring out in my drawing. So I start with the lowest petal because that becomes something of a base. Plus, it is actually closest to me, and I do like drawing the closest things first where possible. I find it helps me with my line work and positioning things, and also in creating a sense of 3 dimensions to start with closest and move further back. So having drawn now these bottom 2 petals, I have even more reference points to align what I'm doing. I had planned to draw this larger than my reference, which I don't usually do. Normally I take the simple path of keeping my drawing pretty much the same size as the reference, but I felt using a 0.3mm pen, it might just overpower the drawing, the subject, the line work if I drew it that small. And I didn't want to switch down to a smaller pen, a thinner pen, because I don't have one at the moment where I think ink is flowing happily enough to do that. So I thought I'll just increase the size, which is what I've done here. So I'm having to approximate a little of the detail just at the very top of the rose because the colour is also bright and intense that it's a bit tricky to see what's happening with the roses. And then I have this most unfurled petal that we have. So I put that in, and then there's just a small amount of shadow to do there, and I'm basically putting the hatchwork in as I go petal by petal. And so I've pretty much now defined the overall shape, and now it's just time to work out what else am I going to do. So I do these, what are they called sepals, the remains of the original bud cover. Get those in place, and then I'm thinking about these buds, which I had always intended to include. And you'll notice that my way of approaching this is to draw the buds first, not to draw the stem that they sit on, because I find if I do the buds first, I can position them exactly where I want them to be in relation to the rose, and now I can join the bud with the stem, and I find it's much easier to do that than to, from the stem, lower down stem, go up and stop that stem accurately and get all the angles right in the right place by going downwards, upwards. It's much easier to place the bud where I want it, or whatever the object is that's joined. When I do tree canopies, I do the foliage first, and then I draw the branches in the foliage, and then I often do the trunk last of all, and that just helps me have everything join up visually properly. And then I do the other bud there, and I don't have room to actually join it on the paper, which is a bit of a shame. Although I always intended to do the rose larger, I didn't actually intend it to be this much larger, and so I didn't position it very well. Just a few more adjustments with the lines, with some hatching, and then this one is done. Now, I have to say, and he just pulled back a little so you can see it more clearly. Before I drew this, which took me 10 minutes, so this has been sped up to double time, I did a quick 5-minute drawing just to warm up. And of course, I think my quick 5-minute, far more gestural drawing is a much nicer drawing than the one that took me 9.5 minutes. What do you think? Do you prefer the quicker, looser version on the left, or the more considered, perhaps a little tighter drawing on the right? Tell me in the comments which you prefer. Sometimes when we feel a little more free, when we're a little less self-conscious about exactness, it actually works out better for our drawing. I think this is a really nice, literally 5.5 minute capture of the subject. And for the extra 4 minutes, I'm not sure I really went anywhere better with it. What do you think? Do you agree? Of course, you'll find this photo on my channel community page, so you can have a go drawing this apricot rose yourself and see how you go. And of course, if you want, you can do a 20-30 minute drawing of it. Our second subject is this small oak occasional table, this little side table, which I picked up at a garage sale somewhere, and is one of the things, if the house was on fire and I was running out the door, I might try and pick it up as I went. And look, it's sorry about missing the very start. I didn't have the camera turned on, but fortunately I realized it just after I did the ellipses for the top of the table. And I have noticed that, in fact, the tabletop is warped. I've been aware of that before I went to draw it, but I decided to keep it simple just by making it nice and straight. Now, this is actually, as it turned out, a good reminder, this subject, this table, that perspective is very relevant to any object that we draw. It's just that it's often more obvious the more geometrically shaped a subject is, such as a big building. But equally, a small object such as this round table with squared legs, circular legs, that are positioned at four corners, so to speak, that all the rules of perspective that we apply with a building apply here. And one of the things I realized perhaps a bit later than I should have was that eye level is above the table, and therefore with all of the circular lines, all of the circular edges of the rounded parts of the legs that form ellipses as we look at them angled on, that as they move down the table towards the floor, they become rounder and fuller. They become more and more towards a circular shape, and less towards the very flat ellipse that the top of the table has formed. And so that would have been helpful to have realized just a little bit sooner. Now, important thing with a subject such as this is where we have, if you like, stacked shapes, as we do with the legs, is that we stack them nice and straight. And unfortunately, the very first thing that you saw me draw on camera, the top of the extreme left-hand leg angles slightly to the right. And unfortunately, that's not the tilt of the camera. That's how the drawing goes. Sometimes with those very first lines, when we don't have any other lines to reference, we can get them a little bit wobbly. Never mind. So now I've got the fluting of the legs, and of course this first leg I did the fluting for is the worst. And in a sense, when I did the most visually prominent one, I worked out how to do a better job than the one I did. So sometimes it's good to make the first of a repeated number of things that we do one of the less obvious ones, so that we leave the one which jumps out most until we've had a bit of practice. And so now I'm checking my angles, because I need to position this fourth leg at the back. And this is the sort of situation where we get made clear to us whether or not we've really positioned things okay, when we have to place an object within a space that we've created in drawing other objects. Because if we've drawn it accurately, we shouldn't have any problem fitting this new object into the space with the right proportions and having everything look correct. And if we haven't got it right, then it's just not going to be possible to sit it and create new spaces that reflect the proportions of the reference. But I'm happy enough with how this leg fits in, and just having to make it look a bit smaller because it's further away. So we want to see a difference in width between that furthest leg and the closest one. So that's another factor we need to keep in mind as we draw. And now these perspective angles. And again, it's just as with the circular edges with the ellipses, I need to bear in mind that all the horizontal lines, that the perspective pattern, since they're all below eye level, is that the angle increases as they move down the page, as they move down the table. So the horizontal lines as part of the very base of the legs, the squared off shapes towards the base, those angles slope upwards on the right hand side more and more as they move down the table. So now just finishing with these rounded parts, and this is probably where I think, oh, these have to be more circular than the other parts. We're really looking more downwards onto the circular shape here than we get at the top of the table, even though in fact they are all circular shapes. From this viewpoint, from this perspective, we don't quite see it that way. Now, of course, this reference as well will be on my channel community page if you want to print off a copy of it and have a go drawing it yourself. It's not a straightforward subject, but I think it's a nice one to push ourselves with for perspective. And if you want, you can always simplify the legs just to make it a more straightforward subject and not to get caught up with some of the finesse of the detail of the actual table, and just get full advantage of the perspective and the other challenges there. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. So why not give this a go? But look, whatever you draw and however you draw it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.